After the IETF 97 Pecha Kucha, I received some feedback that it would be useful for me to record my talk at a more relaxed rate. Comments of going at zero point 0.9 Ecker were made. So this is my effort to slow it down for non-native English speakers and others whose parse rates are not quite so high. The title of my talk is on bandwidth and latency and delay in the IETF. So, what are we all doing here? We fly long distances to come to these very important meetings. And in these very important meetings, we sit and we stare at our laptops. Perhaps we are reading drafts. Perhaps we are talking on Jabber to others in the room. We speculate that everyone's simply on email. And the reality is, we're all looking at cat pictures. We have fun socializing and focused conversations with napkins. The napkins are very important. Everybody knows you can't get a new protocol through the routing area unless the first version is on napkins. We let you use more than 3. After all, it's a more complicated network than when BGP was invented. We have a long and fine tradition of having many fine lunches and dinners. It was even a joke 10 years ago. So what we're really doing, we're building trusted relationships. After all, we are all individuals, and it's important to get to know each other and understand what makes us come here and get work done. And obviously, it's because it's really important for the internet to keep working. Otherwise, people might find computers made them more productive. And understanding of our common concern for the internet and who we each are as individuals lets us all find our happy place together in technical negotiation. This is important so that we are comfortable taking criticism as a compliment. At least they reviewed your draft. All of us enjoy poking holes in solutions, finding the problems. We like to poke holes again and again and again and again. But the important thing to remember is that we're attacking ideas, not people. And with those trusted relationships, we're usually good with this. We're all engineers. We understand that sarcasm is a side effect of solving solutions, maybe a large side effect. After all, that's why we're here at the Pecha Kucha. Of course, once you've built your trusted relationship, you may decide just to stay uninvolved. Maybe instead of making that critical comment in the working group, you'll find the person afterwards and make a comment then. Perhaps if you don't see them in the hallway that meeting, well, there's always next meeting. Sure, it'll take the work longer to get done, but you need a dinner companion. That's important. When this works well, when the IETF works well, you can rapidly debate technical issues. So we have low latency and high bandwidth at an IETF meeting so that everyone can work together to build a common picture of the particular protocol, the larger architecture, and the problem statements and use cases that are needed in order to understand what to standardize for interoperability. And that lets us get down to the really important things like discussing vigorously what order the flags bits in a header should be, or how many bits there need to be in the protocol type field. So, why do we always come here? Is it a hobby, like woodworking or knitting? Is it like Brigadoon, where IETF appears out of the mist for one magical week and then disappears again until the next meeting? Or are we here to work hard, have fun, and make a difference, making the internet work better? We've already talked about what the bandwidth and latency behavior at an IETF meeting are. Let's talk about after the IETF meeting. After the IETF meeting, you have extremely long latency because most people are just recovering. Some of them don't even check their email. We'll talk about the average bandwidth and moderate latency experienced on a mailing list. If the AD, like me, myself, or working group chair asks, suddenly the latency noticeably decreases. And of course, the best time other than at an IETF meeting is a week before the draft deadline between the authors when they communicate rapidly, remember all the context, and even talk on the phone. So let's talk about what happens on the mailing list. When you have a sender who wants to send some information about a particular internet draft. Of course, we're going to model humans as computers because that's natural. We're engineers. So most people, even myself, are not multi-core CPUs. So we can't actually multitask. Instead, we simulate this by loading information and going from one task to another. So in this case, we load information out of disk storage. Sometimes that's email, sometimes that's long-term memory, frequently it's the data tracker, into a register and think about and send our message, and then store our context away into memory for hopefully later use, a little more accessible. Then the receiver and responder, if you are lucky enough to have a responder, well, of course they're doing their day job, even though IETF work is probably part of their day job too. So they have to finish the 12 tasks of Hercules before they are able to do the same thing. They load the draft context out of disk storage into their registers, compose the response, and store it away again into memory. If you are lucky, then this cycle repeats, and each time the context is stored closer and closer to the registers until finally both parties have the context stored at, say, a level 1 cache or even in the registers, and you can get very low latency.
But it's not a unicast conversation, and at the IETF, we all know that multicast or multi-group conversations are a little more tricky. You have all types of participants there. Some are just watching. Some can't manage that, at least not now. And of course, there are the participants who are sort of like Internet of Things light bulbs, IoT light bulbs. They have low bandwidth and small active storage. Sometimes they try to load from the network, which is to say, your emails. And so they ask again and again for clarification, and it can take them days in between in order to come up to speed and produce a meaningful interaction. The thing about IoT light bulb participants is they're very good at reliably reporting their own document state. What I don't understand is where's the Yang model for this? We all know how important it is to have good models for telemetry so we can have interoperable systems to collect that telemetry. Where's the Yang model to describe participant telemetry? I don't know. We also have occasional participants who parachute in to express their opinions. Unfinished bike sheds are particularly a hazard for this type of participant. After all, everyone, even my 4-year-old, can express an opinion on what color we should paint the bike shed. We didn't, by the way. And then there are the participants who wake up after a long nap, look around and say, what's that then? The worst kind of problem for these occasional participants and a working group is that frequently, or at least sometimes, they're right.
So I've discussed already a bit of the progress between IETFs. On the one hand, you have a draft where there's a conversational ball in slow motion between multiple participants in the IETF on the mailing list, and eventually you'll resolve all of the and clarify all of the disagreements. It may take till the next meeting when you can get together in person. Of course, you could just pick up the phone and do that sooner, but another IET meeting is coming. On the other hand, there's the splendor of a frozen draft that only changes immediately before IETFs and sees no conversation. But I don't want you to think that I think the primary work happens only on the mailing list. After all, the point of the IETF is not to produce reams of documentation, though we clearly have done so. The point is to implement and deploy the technology that we're developing to make the internet work better. You'll notice here, my example is of deploying RTC Web. That's not because I couldn't find a normal picture of a routed network, but because as area director, I actually see other parts of the internet work that we're doing and realize how utterly cool it is.
So let's talk about progressing an idea. Here we're describing what happens with our clock tick in IETF meeting cycles. The first time you present an idea, it is absolutely heretical. How could you have thought that? By the second IETF meeting, just business as usual. And by the third, everyone is bored. They're so bored, they're looking at cat pictures. Then, at some point after the fourth IETF meeting, the working group chair is trying to get adopted documents off their plate, looks around, asks, does anyone still care? There's no contention? Great. Just publish it already. And that's when the draft comes to me as an AD.
So, why is the IETF slow? Well, we all know the saying of fast, good, cheap, pick two. And at the IETF, we always pick good because it's only the future of the internet. Sometimes it can feel like a volunteer project that's all around the world. I can always count on getting email at 3 a.m. And sometimes it feels like an unfunded project as everyone focuses on their day job, even though for many people it's their day job that asks them to participate in the IETF. But there's urgent and there's important. So, why do we come here? Well, different people have different hobbies. Some people go dancing, other people like making the internet work better. Except it's not a hobby, because hobbies are things that you keep doing with your friends when you get home. Instead of treating the IETF like a comet that flies in 3 times a year for a brief week, remember, IETFers are people in your neighborhood. You can get together with them at IETF Hub or start an IETF Hub. You can communicate in many different ways.
So the internet's been working great for communication, for all sorts of things. We have an internet that even IoT devices can use consistently, again and again and again and again and again. We're working on solutions for that. We have an internet where voice over IP has given us a lot of flexibility and even lots of robocalling, but we're solving that thanks to Stir.
And so we go on learning about the issue, patching up the holes we find in the internet architecture and our solutions, because the internet really matters. It matters to society. Our children can't imagine living someplace where there isn't the internet. And I know when I get home, I'll keep on working because too busy is a mess, and the internet's really important. And so's the length of my publication queue. Looking forward to the spikes.